Okay, in this episode, what we are discussing is vaping. These little things right here is a USB drive, but there's vapes out there that look like this and resemble this, and if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know that this was a vape. And that's what parents have to contend with nowadays when dealing with their kids and this vaping epidemic that children are undertaking at sometimes at the age of 10 years old. So that's what we're discussing in this episode. It's everything to do about vaping, what you can do to combat it, and what to look out for. And so a lot of good content in here. So the only other thing is I kind of screwed up the audio a little bit, so please forgive me. Muscle through it. It's good content, but just turn your volume up a little bit, all right? Later. Hey everyone, welcome to Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad, and in today's episode, we are going to be discussing vaping. You know, those little e-cigarette pod things that, chances are your teenager is using, or you're using, or the big old vape pens that look like you took a battery out of a remote control car and you made it blow vape or whatever. Those things are so obnoxious. But anyways, that's what we're going to be discussing today. Everything about vaping. What you need to know, what maybe you don't know, and hopefully give you some insight on the potential destruction that it's doing to your body. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Tom, this show's about addiction, and, what's this have to do with anything? Well, reality of it is that a lot of teenagers, I've done talks with young kids in elementary schools that are 12, 13 years old that are using these things. So it definitely has a lot to do with addiction in the sense that, look, addiction starts somewhere. And for a lot of kids, it could be this stupid little vape pen, this Juul that everybody's using. So that is why we are discussing that today. Couple things, though, before we get started. If you have any questions or you have any comments about any of the stuff that we're producing here, you can go to realrecoverytalk.com, and there you will find a little chat thing in the bottom right-hand corner. It says live chat. You can click that. If you have any questions, if you or somebody you know needs help, or there's some sort of addiction problems going there, you can go there and you can click that little button, and it's going to come directly to my phone. And I'll be able to answer any questions that you have, or if you have some topics that you want to hear, or anything of the sorts. If it has anything to do with addiction, let me know. Shoot me a message. Or if you just want to say hello, you can do that too. Also, YouTube, go subscribe to this, share it, and hopefully somebody gets this that needs it. That's why we're putting out this content, because addiction affects a ton of people, and we have to talk about it. We have to do something about it, because the people that pretty much operate this country, it doesn't seem like they're doing much about it. So it's left for us to do ourselves. All right. With that being said, vaping, here we go. Like I said, we go and talk with a lot of young kids in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and the most common thing that you see there is everybody is vaping. And one of the first things that I do before I even start my presentation or I start talking to them is I say, raise your hand if you yourself or somebody you know has ever tried vaping. And if there's 100 students in there, 95 of them will raise their hand. That is how prevalent it is in schools right now. And I'll say, okay, well, what are some areas within the school that people will, where will they go to vape, or where do you see this at on school grounds? The bathroom, the library, the cafeteria, the bus stops, the track, basically everywhere. In the classrooms themselves, people are using these things, and they've gotten so slick about it where they can actually vape in their sleeve, blow the smoke in their sleeve, and the teachers don't even have any clue that this is taking place. So it's definitely becoming an issue. And I don't know what measures that are being done to prevent this. The schools, I've gone to dozens, and basically their measures are, if we catch you doing it, you're going to get maybe a couple of days of in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, which if it's out-of-school suspension, normally I was suspended out of school, and I loved it. You know, it was kind of a gift. And students may not look at that as much of a penalty. So, and that's where when I go in and I make these, or I talk to these students, I tell them, I say, look, if one of you gets something from this, then my talk, the reason that I came here was to help just one person. And if I can do that, then this was a successful presentation for me. And I like to think that, you know, by us talking about it more, bringing awareness to it, helping the students understand that this is something that I can choose to do or not to do, and we're arming them with the evidence, we're arming them with, you know, the repercussions of doing it. So, how did vaping even come about? Well, about 10 or 12 years ago, they came about because they were used for smoking cessation. Smoking cessation was basically presented as, okay, we know cigarettes are bad. We know that they cause lung disease. They cause heart disease. They rot your teeth out of your head. They make you stink. Cancer, all this stuff. You know, and you see the commercials on TV now where people are, you know, recording a commercial 2 days literally before they die of whatever smoking-related illness. We know smoking's terrible. So we're going to produce something that helps people come off of smoking. And here comes e-cigarettes. And I remember back in 2010, when I went to treatment, my dad bought me an e-cigarette to take with me to treatment, which was fine. It was a great gesture. And I smoked this e-cigarette. And listen, I'm not saying that e-cigarettes are just as bad as cigarettes or cigarettes are just as bad as e-cigarettes. That's not the topic of today. But we are only 10, 12 years into this e-cigarette phase. And so what I tell people, or what I try to portray, is if you can think back to, I've seen movies, black and white movies, where you would see people walking in the grocery store, you know, smoking a cigarette. They'd be at the library smoking a cigarette. They would be, you know, smoking back then wasn't a big deal because nobody even knew what the health repercussions were. And it was just a thing that people did. And now here we are, you know, 80 years later, 100 years later, knowing full well that cigarettes kill people. But now we have this e-cigarette thing that is supposed to help people come off of cigarettes. And we're only 10 or 12 years into it as far as research goes. So we don't really have a full understanding of the repercussions that can come from these things. So they were brought about to help people stop smoking cigarettes and take on these e-cigarettes, which again could be more healthy, I guess. But we're only 10 or 12 years into this. And now we're starting to see that there are some health repercussions to vaping. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of young kids are deciding to go this route and to try these things. So, you know, what has come as again, smoking cessation and to help people stop cigarettes, what we're finding is people are bypassing even starting smoking cigarettes. And what they're doing is these young boys and girls, everybody in their schools are doing it. So they're not even smoking cigarettes. They're just going straight to the vape. And again, in my presentations, I will ask students, hey, has any of you ever smoked a cigarette before? And they'll say, ew, no, absolutely not. It's disgusting. My parents smoke. They stink. I would never do that. But yet they're vaping. So they're bypassing the whole cigarette thing, right? Because, you know, vaping is, it's marketed as such a good thing. Some of the things that you'll hear with vaping is it's cleaner, it's cheaper, It smells really good. They have all kind of different flavors of the vape oils and the juices that you can buy. It's appealing, so they market this as some sort of, great thing, when in actuality it's the same thing as cigarettes. And we're seeing these young boys and girls that aren't even smoking cigarettes going straight to vaping. It's known that if an adolescent starts vaping, that they have a 30% higher chance of developing a cigarette habit within 6 months of starting vaping. So let me say that again. If an adolescent vapes today, within 6 months, they have a 30% higher chance of developing a cigarette habit. So again, these things that came about as a smoking cessation are now a gateway into cigarettes. So it's actually doing the opposite. The nicotine content in these things it's through the roof. Okay, so which leads me into my next topic. The people that are producing these things, they don't have to tell you what's in them. Okay, what's in the juice, what's in the oils that are producing the vapors. Now, imagine me coming up to you on the street and saying, here, I hand you a plastic bottle, and inside this plastic bottle, there's a clear liquid, and I tell you that this clear liquid, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and, I want you to put it into your vaporizer, and I want you to smoke it. Anybody with the right state of mind would say, no, I don't know what this stuff is. It's not labeled. It's not nothing. You just want me to put this into my body. And if you had a head on your shoulders, you should say no. But unfortunately, kids 12, 13 years old, they'll just say, okay, whatever. That's essentially what's taking place with these vape oils. Again, they're not regulated. They don't have to say what's in their product. So therefore, it's really no holds bar. They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. So a lot of them will actually market and say that these are nicotine free. And in actuality, they're not nicotine free. There's very small traces of nicotine. And based on what we know with nicotine, it does not take a lot for one to get addicted to nicotine. And nicotine is the most addictive substance on the face of the planet, in my opinion. So I can go on Amazon and buy 100 of those little bottles, and I can put whatever the heck I want in these little bottles, and I can sell them out of the trunk of my car as vape juice. And we don't know what's in it. I ran into a situation a couple of weeks ago where a girl was talking about how she had vaped a couple nights prior to, and she didn't really know what it was, but based on talking with her parents, she had gone into an absolute rage. Now, this girl was young, 19 years old, went into an absolute rage. The father said, this is unlike anything that I had ever experienced in my life. Superhuman strength, a 19-year-old girl, 100 pounds, soaking wet. He said it took all I had to be able to contain her. And she went crazy. And what we're finding now is inside these vapes, they're also putting flocka inside of them. And flocka is, it's a substance that is man-made, that when people smoke it, they just turn into absolute animals. And you can actually go on YouTube and you can search, people on flocka and see that they're running down the streets butt naked because it raises your core body temperature so hot, sometimes 105, 106 degrees. People are literally taking their clothes off and running down the streets. It makes you act like an actual animal. And, people can get tasered by 5 or 10 tasers, and it doesn't affect them in the way that it would had you not had that substance in your body to begin with. So here's this father with his 19-year-old daughter who was exposed to vaping inside school, and I honestly believe that that is what she ended up ingesting, was flocka. And not to mention, it can cause psychiatric breaks that you otherwise wouldn't have. And a lot of times you cannot and will not reverse those things. It will do permanent damage in the brain. And there's nothing that you can do about it. So the vape juice, the vape oils, they're not regulated. They can say and do whatever they want with these things. They can put whatever they want in it and they can sell it to you. Okay? Now, let's talk about the actual effects on the brain because of the nicotine content. At 25 years old, in theory, is when our brain is fully developed. Now, these kids, again, 12, 13 years old, are vaping, and there's nicotine in these things, and it's a proven scientific fact, and I don't have the studies in front of me. I don't need them. I mean, it's common knowledge that nicotine has an effect on the brain. So much so is that it will slow the developmental side of your brain. So, what a normal 12 or 13-year-old kid or 15, whatever, they're supposed to be learning, and their brain can absorb things and learn things to a certain degree and a certain level. But when having a bunch of nicotine in their brain, it's going to slow that down. And the thing is that we have this like compounding factor that nicotine, it's generally not something that you do once and leave it alone. Again, nicotine is super addicting. So what's happening is kids are, maybe they only vape one time, but then the next day they vape twice. They take 2 hits off of the vape pen. And then the next day maybe it's 3. But all the while they're developing this tolerance. They're developing, this habitual habit of vaping, and now fast forward 6 months and they can't even put this thing down. They can't take it out of their pocket. It comes with them everywhere, just like a pack of cigarettes would at 13 years old. I remember at 13 years old I was smoking, but I was picking up cigarette butts off the side of the road if I found them, and I'd take a tiny little hit off of a cigarette and I'd throw it away, Granted, yes, I did end up starting smoking down the line, but it was very difficult for me to get cigarettes. It wasn't something that was readily available, and now the vapes, the Juuls, and everything of the sorts, these e-cigarettes, they can buy them on Amazon. They can buy them at the gas station, even though technically they're regulated. The people that are selling them, they're just not really that regulated. I mean, you can go anywhere and get these things. So the effects on the brain, it has a lot of effects on the brain. Now, aside from that, it also has a biological effect on everything else, right? Because it's nicotine, and we're inhaling that. It's going into our lungs, and we're blowing it out into our lungs. So it does have a cardiovascular effect. It does raise blood pressure. All what we're vaping in is vegetable glycerin. It's going into our lungs. There are cases, and we know that it creates this lung disease called popcorn lung. So we can't sit back and say that there are no ill effects or no physical effects from vaping. I mean, it's out there. The thing is that it's not heart disease right now. It's not lung cancer right now, but it could get there. It definitely could get there. So that's one of the things that we have to remember is that, again, we're only 10 or 12 years into this like e-cigarette phase, maybe 15 years. So there hasn't been a long enough time to be able to do proper research on this. Now, I wanted to go to one of the things of the Juul. The Juul is about yay big, right? And it looks like a USB drive right here. Let me see if I can get this. No. This is a USB drive. This is what a Juul looks like. Now, why does it, and if you're listening to this, you can't obviously see, but if you're on YouTube, you can see, why would they make it look like this? Because if I'm a 12-year-old kid and my parents come across this thing, they're just going to think that it's a USB drive, and they're not going to ask any questions. But in actuality, this is my vape. And, this isn't an actual Juul, so I'm not going to blow any smoke out. But why do they have to make it look so secretive? Well, it's a marketing thing. If 12-year-olds can get their hands on this thing and parents are not likely to find out or know what it is, then they're just going to continue to do it. And Juul really kind of got themselves a nice little cash cow there for a while, because they were able to sell to, I don't even know, billions of dollars were generated from these things. And parents were, for a certain degree, are clueless, because it looked like a USB drive. They didn't know the difference, but meanwhile, it's a pod. That's what they call it now. And so Juul were producing these things, and the 12 or 13-year-old boy or girl was getting it, and they were trying it out, and next thing you know, their friends are seeing it. Hey, what's that thing? Oh, it's my Juul. What's the Juul? Well, it's the vape. Here, try it. And here, you can try it if you want. And they hand it off to their friend, and they take a hit of it. So another part of my presentation and what I do is, what is one of the biggest marketing ploys for these e-cigarette companies? And oftentimes kids will raise their hand and they'll say, well, it's social media, or, well, it's newspapers and magazines, or it's TV ads, or whatever the case is. And I say, well, those are all great avenues for marketing, but the number one form of marketing for these companies are you. The person that is sitting here right now, watching me, listening to me, you're the number one form of marketing, because if they can get their product into your hands and they can get you addicted to their product to where you can't put it down, and you are very likely to share about this product to your friends, especially if it's something that you like. Now, they will pour money into their marketing efforts via Google, social media, television, all that stuff, but all they're trying to do is get it in your hands. So now they get this USB drive into a little kid's hands, and this little kid is now addicted to this little USB drive that's filled with vape juice and nicotine and everything else that comes with it. Oh, and not to mention it tastes like strawberry cheesecake. And now this little kid is sharing it with his friends, and they do everything together. Him and his friends, they go everywhere together. They play ball together. They do all these things together. They play Fortnite together. They do all that stuff. And so he shares it with his friend, and then his friend shares it with his friend, and his friend shares it with his friend, and next thing you know, the whole entire school is using these things. And so how does all this tie back into addiction? Addiction is addiction. It just happens to be that we work with drug addicts and alcoholics primarily, but addiction encompasses everything: food, sex, shopping, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, chewing tobacco. It does not matter. And I've even seen that television show, My Strange Addiction, where I saw one person, they were addicted to eating drywall. I think that show is a little far-fetched and probably not true, but I don't know. But how this ties into addiction is that we're promoting addiction to 12-year-old boys and girls, 10-year-old boys and girls by these things. We're basically saying that it's okay if you become addicted to these, because these aren't really that bad. They're cheaper than cigarettes, and you don't want to become addicted to cigarettes because we know what cigarettes will do to you. Or chewing tobacco. You don't want to become addicted to that either, because we know what chewing tobacco will do. It'll give you mouth cancer, it'll give you throat cancer, and you'll be dead within 5 years. But these little vapes, these are fine. There's nothing wrong with these. We care about you. We care about you enough to produce these so you don't go and smoke cigarettes and you don't go and chew tobacco. So that's how it ties in with addiction. Because we're basically saying that it's okay and it's better than the alternative. And so it's promoting it. Now, as somebody, if they take this and they smoke it, can I confidently say that they're going to become heroin addicts in the future? No, that would be foolish of me to say. But can I say that it does increase their likelihood of becoming addicted to something? Sure, absolutely. And I fell victim to it myself. These weren't around, though. I became addicted to cigarettes. I became addicted to finding them. I became addicted to, if it was hollow, I would find sticks in the woods. If they were hollow and I could light them on fire, I would smoke them. Because it was enjoyable for me to do. Everything about it I liked doing. And I became addicted to it. And lo and behold, I became addicted to a lot of different things. But it started by smoking sticks in the middle of the woods. So if you're a parent and you know and you came across these things in your kid's bag or whatever, make sure to do research, understand, look at them, know what they are, make sure that they are actual USB drives and that it's not a Juul or something of the like, because I'm sure there's a ton of manufacturers out there now that are making these things and marketing it in different ways. Talk to your kids about these things because you can. You're the parents. I've talked with parents and they're like, well, I don't know what to do at this point. They basically are hiding these things all over the place, and I just don't know what to do. And unfortunately, you can't do everything. But reach out. You reach out to myself. You can talk with other parents that have gone through it. There's a ton of resources at your disposal that you can access. Talk with your children about these things. Talk about the dangers. Talk about, the risks involved with doing it. The whys behind it. Why do I find it necessary to have to use this thing? I wasn't born with it, so I don't need to use it today. It's okay. You're the parent. You are the one that are raising your children. So you have every right to do these things. Go in, flip their rooms upside down. Look for these things and try and find them. And again, if you have questions or if you don't know what to do, reach out to me or our team here. We can help you with anything when it comes to that. We can walk you through that whole entire process. So with that being said, I hope you learned something today about vaping and the dangers and what it can do and what it is doing to our youth. And not only our youth, but, adults too. I know a lot of people that are vaping, and it's just not a good thing to do. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's stupid. I personally would, if it were me, I would just go back to smoking cigarettes. I don't know. They're more enjoyable, but that's just me. I do like cigarettes. I like the smell of cigarettes, but I don't like the idea that I'm basically killing myself by making the choice to smoke them. So, if you know somebody that needs to see this video, please share it. If you know somebody that needs to hear the podcast, please share it. And with that being said, we will see y'all later.